We greet all those persons who are listening to us on NBC Radio and on all local radio stations, television stations, social media platforms, and we welcome colleagues at UWI TV who have joined us to take this broadcast across the region. This morning, we've got in studio Prime Minister Dr. the Honorable Ralphie Gonsalves, and I've got online Professor Dr. Richard Robertson. He's the lead scientist from the UWI Research Center on the island, monitoring the Soufriere volcano. Prime Minister Gonsalves, good morning. Dr. Robertson, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, Richie.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Good morning, everyone.
Okay, gentlemen, we're happy to have you both back with us in studios this morning and joining us online via Zoom. Let us jump right into it this morning. Professor Robertson, the volcano, we understand, had its most explosive eruption this morning, just shortly after 4 o'clock. Let us speak about that and what does this mean?
Right. I'm always hesitant to speak about most explosive or biggest and things like that because things always change. But certainly this morning, and I'll come back to this morning because I like to do a review. Over the past couple of hours or so, the patterns changed slightly at the volcano, where people know that what we've been having so far, we've been having these tremors during which you've had vigorous activity, often an explosion or some venting, and then there's a quiet period, and then you have them again. And they had an interval of about 1.5 to 2 hours, 3 hours, and they lasted for about 20 to 40 minutes. Over the last, since about late yesterday evening, the pattern changed slightly where you're still having that episodic behavior, but the duration of the episodes and the space between them changed. So that the episodes got to be about 20 minutes, so they're probably a little bit shorter, but the gap between them increased to between 2, I think it's now between 2 to about 3 hours, and now it's actually currently about 4 to 5 hours, the gap between them. But, and what they involved again was the same thing. You had an explosion of some sort, material goes into the air, produces a lot of ash. From satellite imagery that we've recently gotten, it seems that one of the things that they were also doing was producing these pyroclastic density currents, these currents that move down the mountainside, which I've spoken about before, that are very destructive. And we think that the first set of them actually happened as early as the first set of these pulses, these patterns that we had. We've had about 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm actually looking at the jumps. I couldn't tell you. But 4 of them starting from about 6 o'clock or so late yesterday evening. And one of the first sets actually produces these flows. Now, we come to this morning, around 4 o'clock, another one of them happened. And this particular one was probably one of the bigger ones. I wouldn't say it's the biggest one because we still, we might see a bigger one or we might see a smaller one. I don't like to say the biggest because it all is changing. It's really relative. But it punched a lot of things up in the air. And from what we can see, because it's in the night now, so we could look at the observatory and we could see what's happening. It wasn't perfect conditions. But in the night, when these things happen, when material goes up in the air, even though in the day it looks like white powder or so, in the night, it's what we call incandescent. It glows. So we can see where things are going from the glow. And in this case, we saw pyroclastic flows, pyroclastic density currents, going down quite a few valleys around the volcano. From this end, we could see things like it went into, it's not perfectly clear because it's in the night and we could only detect them from the glow. We could see glow going down Larakai. We could see glow going down areas like Wallabu, the upper parts of Rabaka. We could see indication that there might have been stuff going down valleys a little bit north of that. But basically what happened is that you had a big explosion and you have pyroclastic density currents going down multiple valleys on the volcano. And from what we could see, they reached a little bit further down valley than we had seen. I would not be surprised, for example, if when we go and check this morning, that the one that went down Larakai, for example, probably went as far as the coastline. Now, these pyroclastic density currents are the most dangerous things that can happen from volcanoes like ours. I think I've said that multiple times. I hope people understand what they are. Essentially, what they are, and I'll talk about what they are and how they might be generated. When you think of the volcano exploding, the mountain, the mass that is there, or the material that is there, comes out rapidly in an explosive manner. It fragments, it breaks up into smaller pieces. Now, these smaller pieces most often go up in the air. And a lot of the activity we had so far was what might be called just open vent gushing of material. You have an explosion, it fragments the material into fine pieces. Now, for whatever reason, and we could speculate about that, when this new pattern started, the volcano had, in a sense, slowed down. It's beginning to get a bit more sluggish. And therefore, when it gets a bit more sluggish, it stops itself and it forms a bigger cap, say, to pressurize. And therefore, when it breaks up the pieces that comes out are bigger. And if they're bigger, then it doesn't have as much, the likelihood that they all go up in the air because it has to use more energy to get it up is decreased. So what happens sometimes is that they fall back. Instead of going all up in the air, it falls back on itself in a process that we call column collapse. Not dome collapse, but column collapse. In other words, the column of air, the column of gas and rocks and boulders, instead of going up in the air, it collapses on itself. And when it collapses on itself, it collapses on the mountain. And it goes down the mountain. Often it follows the valleys, but it's not confined to the valleys, but it follows the valleys like a river, but moving much faster than a river. And it moves down the mountainside. And because it's hot, because it have different size of rocks in it, because it has gas in it, because it's moving fast, virtually there are very few structures in the world that could stand up to the forces of that material going down mountainside. So it just destroys everything. Trees get mashed up, buildings get mashed up, things get bulldozed out of the way. I've seen in Montserrat when they've had very intense PDCs, they have shaved buildings off. You could see the foundation. You could see it like if somebody came and cut with a saw and cut it out. So those are the things that were shooting on the mountainside last night at 4. And they happened before, but these ones that happened around 4 o'clock this morning were particularly energetic, were particularly fast moving. They got further, basically. And therefore, you'd see that's one of the biggest things that have happened. We've been talking about PDCs all the time. Now, the other way in which they form, so one way is by column collapsing, but there's another way in which they form. And we think the earlier ones, the ones that happened, like remember I said there were about 4 of these periods that happened. The earlier periods, we think one of the ways in which it's happened is that the material just formed over. So instead of going up in the air, sometimes the volcano doesn't have enough energy to punch. When it explodes, it doesn't have enough energy to put everything up in the air and to allow it to collapse. What happens is that it's like a foam. It just foams over the side of the mountain and go down the mountainside. And we think the earlier ones, the weaker ones, that from satellite imagery actually happened as early as yesterday, late yesterday. We couldn't see them, of course, because it probably happened in the day and the shroud is not incandescent. But these foaming kind of pyroclastic density currents, they didn't go very far and they actually went down the valleys. And from what we see, you had them also going down Larracan and places like that. The ones that happened this morning, we think, were more from column collapse, although you might have had some foaming also. And the column collapse ones tend to go further afield. They tend to go further down the valley. Now, unfortunately, what all of that means, because of the strength of the explosion, because of the PDCs that happened this morning, I suspect quite a bit of the mountain now and the communities that the buildings and the structures that are on the mountain are destroyed and damaged, mashed up. I shudder to think of if any living creatures was on that mountain, because anything that was there, man, animal, anything, in those PDCs, the part of those PDCs, they're gone. And it's a terrible thing to say, but yeah.
PDCs meaning Richie, PDCs meaning pyroclastic density currents.
Yeah. And people call them different things.
Okay.
Pyroclastic density currents, pyroclastic flows and surges.
Okay.
The French call them nuits ardentes, glowing avalanches. These are the things which in 1902 made Montpellier famous. Montpellier became famous because the the Noir Dawn went into Saint-Pierre and killed everybody. These are the things that did that. And in Saint-Pierre and in Montpellier in 1902, this is where volcanologists understood how dangerous these things are. Which is why from then, we've been saying these volcanoes, when they do these things, we need to move back away from them. But that's in a sense, that's the summary of what I have to say. What I should say also is that from satellite imagery, we now know, people were asking what happened to the old dome, what happened to the new dome. We now know that the new dome and the old dome are gone. They have been destroyed completely. We now have a crater at the summit of Soufriere, a vent opening that is estimated to be 825 meters by 715 meters in dimensions. We have a huge hole in the mountain in the middle. And it is from there, since around 2 days ago, that all of the action is happening. It has an opening in the mountain now, at the summit, more or less in the middle of the crater, where you used to have the 1979 dome, and where you used to have the 2020-21 dome that came out. All of that has been going up in the air and fallen as ash here and in Barbados and other places. And it is from this that the mountain is now producing freely explosions. So when it explodes, it's easy for stuff to come out. And you can see the venting after, which is just open venting. It probably doesn't have anything in it other than fresh magma. It's possible as it slows down and as it gets, it's possible it might create like it did in 79, another new dome to end it, or it might end up with an open crater. So Soufriere, when you go up to Soufriere in the future, it's going to be a very different mountain, and you're going to see things much different. There's no more dome. It's gone.
Now, Richie, let me ask this. You say that the volcano is getting more sluggish. That is why you have had either the spillover, and I take the imagery
the
there.
Is correct. Yeah.
Both the spillover and the imagery I take from that is when we boil milk and we ain't careful and the milk come over the pot.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That's one imagery for the boil over. And the other dome, the column collapse. That's when it doesn't boil over. It goes up a little, but doesn't have enough energy to go into the air.
Like when sometimes you leave the cover on the pot.
Yes.
And the cover might move.
Yes.
And then it spill back down, and then it spill over because it pushed back down. That kind of thing is the column collapse. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just want to get the imagery for folks who are listening. Now, is this pattern of sluggishness means that, is it too early to say that it's exhausting itself?
Not really. It tells us, it probably makes us a bit more confident of a certain kind of model that we have of what is happening. What you could think of happening is, let's go back to that foam analogy. The boiling over.
Of the milk.
Now, if you think that, right, the milk. So if you think that the milk that you have was the source of this magma down beneath the surface, right?
Yes.
And because the milk boiled, a foam, the part that's boiling over, the foamy part,
yes,
that developed, right? That developed. And it is that foamy part that was under the earth that then pushed up because it developed pressure and then pushed out what was there before. And what was there before was probably the 2021 dome that we saw, right?
Yes.
So it came out. It pushed it out to the way and it came out. And once it came out, the 2021 dome then stopped it from coming out anymore because the weight of it, right? It held it back. But it's still trying to come out before the foam wants to come out, right? The foam eventually pushes through the 2021 dome. And the foam is a different kind of foam. The foam is a foam that when it comes out, the foaming part, when it comes out, it doesn't want to stay a foam. It has all the gases and all the little bubbles in it just become more energetic. And then instead of just foaming out, it pelts itself up in the air and creates these explosions, right? So that happens. So you could think that after it runs out the foam, after the foamy part runs out, all you have is the milk, right?
Yes.
It's not foamy. So yes, so let's keep that analogy. So what then has to happen is that another foam has to form, right?
Yes.
More foam has to form. And while that foam is forming, the mountain that was there before, the stuff that was on top of it, which is pelted out before, now is starting to hold it back, right? So it started to stop the foam from coming out. So the same kind of process that pushed out the first set can happen again. But now it doesn't have the weight of the dome. It doesn't have so much stuff about it. So it could push through a little bit easier. So what is happening now with the explosions that we have, which probably producing the dome collapse, the column collapse pyroclastic flows, is because each time before the foam forms and pushes through, it's actually creating a little cap of hard rocks that has to push through. So yes, the more we don't know, the thing that we don't know, why we don't know whether it's going on, is we don't know how much milk it have to boil to foam. That's the problem.
Yes.
We don't know exactly how much milk. So when it don't have any milk, is when it will probably run out. Or when the milk is so small that it can't produce any more foam, any more extra to go out.
Okay.
So that's the part. I think the good thing is that more than likely you have a finite amount of milk. You only have a certain amount. You don't have an endless. It's not like the milk go on forever and ever, amen.
Yes.
You only have a pot of milk. You only have a certain amount of milk. So when you boil off that milk and you created all the foam you could create, it runs out. Then is when the quiet period start. So the question we don't know is how much milk we have, really.
And
if we knew that, we could say how long it will go on.
Well, that's why I'm coming. That's the question. That
Yeah.
The earlier you had said the way this is going, it might go several weeks up to months, maybe up to 4 months.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, is the sluggishness at this stage your expectation, or you think that it's getting sluggish a little sooner than you thought?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Okay.
Because we don't know enough about the amount of material down there. I think the positive part I would take away from it, though, because there's a negative and positive, but the positive part is that the fact that it's doing this kind of behavior makes it more likely that what you will have, less likely that you would have the kind of ash venting that you had for those 2 or 3 days, where you had all of this ash going on. But if as much as you could cap it and cause it to have just one explosion and then cap it again, it means that what you will have is explosions that will probably produce a certain limited amount of ash. Yes, it will trash the whole mountain and mash up everything up here, but that's all it will trash. It won't produce so much ash that will affect the rest of the country. So we could all go ahead, living our lives as much as we can, and leave the other side, the northern part, alone until it run out of all that milk it has to run out and boil off. So that's the positive take I take.
But at the same time, while the ash would not be coming, and while it's getting sluggish, we have to be mindful that the dangerous pyroclastic flows.
Yes.
That is what is happening now, and we have to stay away from that.
Exactly. And the other thing I wanted to make people understand, because people often think about if it's getting the pyroclastic flows now, it means that somehow it become more dangerous and we have to move people further afield because it could get to the southern part. It doesn't mean that. We always catered for the pyroclastic flows in the looking at the hazard. We always knew it will do what it's doing now. And where it's doing it is on the mountain. So that's where you have to, as you said, you have to make sure that nobody is there, that people move off. And I really, really hope that people had heeded that and people had moved. And if anybody is there that's survived what happened last night, I mean, you don't risk it. Because I'll tell you why. What happens with the pyroclastic density currents and the pyroclastic flows? The material that's going on the mountainside, all of it doesn't go down the mountainside. It is deposited. As it goes down, it's leaving some behind. So what is going to happen is that the top of the mountain, which used to have a valley, it's leaving stuff there. And after a while, you don't have the valley anymore. So now, when it collapses, it doesn't have a valley to keep it in the valley. So when it collapses and when it moves down, it's going to spread further and it's going to go further downfield. So we wouldn't be surprised if the first set only went a mile, next time it collapses, the other one will go 2 miles. It goes further down the valley and then goes out to sea. The thing it wouldn't do, because we have so much mountains between Soufriere and the south of the country, is come too much further south, because simply the mountains are stopping it. We have a barrier between Soufriere and the south of the country. But we don't have a barrier between Soufriere and the sea. So we expect the pyroclastic flows, density currents, to go more and more until they reach the sea. And when they reach the sea, they will just boil the water and shoot and go a little bit further out to sea and then sink to the ocean eventually. But they wouldn't come too much further south.
Let me ask this again, Richie. How are we going to be sure, now we have daylight,
Yeah.
the extent of these pyroclastic flows? Are we going by the Coast Guard to look both north and northeast and northwest?
We'd like to do that as soon as you and the audience allow me off the
Fine.
the radio.
Well, we can.
I'll jump into a boat and go and see. Yes, that's the plan. Exactly the plan. We want to do that because it's very important for us to know where they went, which valleys, how far they reached down, because that tells us something about how the volcano is operating. So we'd love to be able to do that, and we can. You'll see. In fact, right now where I am in Belmont, I can see evidence of where the pyroclastic flow went in this area because I can see the semen of the ground. Now, the other important thing, and people shouldn't be surprised, I think there is that when the rain falls next time, this hot material that is in the valley is going to come as a mud flow down the valley. And the river water is going to be at very least warm, or the river water might be hot. So don't be surprised if you then see lahars and mud flows going down the valley and it's steaming because it's remobilizing hot material that's higher up the valley.
Now, when you're going on the Coast Guard vessel, given what you said about the energy coming down and going into the sea and causing the ripples and may go out for a certain distance, you'd have to stay pretty far out of the reach.
Yes, and that's actually something now for fishermen and people who fish anywhere north of the country to think of. There needs to be a buffer zone outside. So when we say that Soufriere is dangerous and don't go north, don't go north don't mean don't go on the land north. Don't go north means that you don't go 2 or 3 miles outside the coastline that is the northern part. So if you're catching fish anywhere north in the area, don't go to the coast too close because one of those things could hit the coastline and shoot out and catch you. So stay away from the coastline.
So maybe you would recommend about 3 miles?
Yeah, to be safe, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's...
In fact, in places like Montserrat, where there's a buffer zone, they have a maritime exclusion zone that they also have. Their hazard zones extends offshore because they want to make sure people stay away from the coastline also. That's usually what's done.
Okay. Well, we should let you go, Richie.
Yes.
And I will then carry on unless Dion has any questions for you.
Well, Prime Minister, I do, but I think it's important that he goes and we'll check in with him after.
Well, Richie,
probably give an update.
The other half of the R&R show, I will continue.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you much, Professor Robertson. Prime Minister, you just go right ahead, and then we will get into it as we get.
No. I just want to say that Montgomery Daniel went up yesterday to Sandy Bay. And if Montgomery, and came back down, if Montgomery is listening to us, I'm wondering if he calls in. You can tell him the number?
Yes, I can actually call him Prime Minister.
Okay, well, if you call Montgomery.
Yes, I will do that.
If you call Montgomery in meanwhile, so that he can tell us of his experiences when he went up and about the ash and about the Rabaca River and the things like that. Because he made some observations which I think would be useful for the audience to hear.
Just before we will speak with him in a while, I just saw a note here. The distribution companies have come together and they're asking all the workers who assist in terms of the distribution and who work on the trucks if they can please make it into the jobs at the supermarket so that they can take some supplies to the emergency and evacuation centers. So persons who are listening, please, if you can just encourage them to head into work so that they can speed up the chain in terms of delivery.
Absolutely. Now, if before you get Montgomery Daniel, remember you had asked me the question yesterday morning as to whether we are going to have work today.
Yes, please.
And on balance, I decided that we will have work. That's last night, up to yesterday afternoon, and I gave instructions to the cabinet secretary to send out something that those public servants who are not in shelters, those who are able to come to work, and certainly essential services, that we'd like to see them come out to work. But this morning, when we got the information about the pyroclastic flows at 4:15, when I was given that information, I gave the instructions then that we will keep the persons who coming in to a mixture of essential services and some quote-unquote non-essential services generally, but essential during this time. Like, for instance, the supermarkets have to be opened. We'd like to see the gas stations because people need gas and diesel. The port has to be opened because the workers have to come and help and unload the supply vessels which are coming in today. I believe one is probably in from Grenada with water, for instance. They stopped off in Canawan to let off some passengers. The Venezuelan vessel is coming here mid-morning. It should have been 8, but the new time is between 10 and 11, and so on and so forth. The naturally water, Vinlec this morning early, as soon as I got the information, I called Gart Saunders of the CWSA, and I called Thornley Myers of Vinlec. What Gart Saunders is telling me, and if he's listening, he could always call in if I misrepresent what he said. What he basically said that the rain coming is a kind of double-edged sword. The rain cleans up, for instance, Kingston areas in the orange zone, in the green zone and in the yellow zone, and puts a damper on the ash in the other areas. But what the rain does in respect to the water supply, it takes it longer for the system to be cleansed, because the ash on the hillsides, when the rain comes, the rain washes the ash. Even if the ash is not falling as much as before, but the ash which already accumulated and the rain comes and washes it washes it down into the catchment areas and into the rivers. So and that will delay the full resumption. What Gart outlined to me is that, well, the supplies are rapidly dwindling, supplies of the water. Though there is down in South Leeward area, there is a tank on the ground, a well really, which they've been pumping water from, drawing water from, and distributing with 20-something trucks. There are areas which have not been, areas where you haven't had any evacuation or significant evacuation. You take an area like Park Hill, where you don't have any river like you have, say, in South Rivers. People are having problem there with water, and we have to try and get water there, and of course to the shelters. And also, persons who are not in the shelters, in the orange zone, are having difficulties in some cases with food. So that is something which we have to address. NEMO has to address. And we are having a National Emergency Management Council meeting under my chairmanship at 2 o'clock. At 2 o'clock today, where some of those things are going to be finalized. But in the meanwhile, I'll be talking to Michelle about some things which can be done. Similarly, we have the
Prime Minister Gart Saunders has arrived at the studio. So I'm just going to let him come.
Well,
let
yes. Gart come in then, and he can tell the story. Thanks, Gart.
Go right ahead, Mr. Saunders.
Okay, yes, good morning. Morning to all the listeners here, persons in the studio. PM, I was on my way here. I heard a lot of what you said, and you quite accurately represented what we had discussed earlier this morning. But the situation is, as you mentioned, our supplies are dwindling. The supplies that we had collected prior to the eruption. Fortunately, we have a few areas where we are able to extract water from now. So that's some springs, some wells, and right now in the Mamoon area, we have a treatment plant that's operating there. And Mamoon
you need to see where Mamoon is located.
Mamoon is in the foothills of Mount St. Andrew. So
yes.
That's very much in the green zone and not as much affected as the areas in the orange, yellow, and red zones. So we have a limited supply from that source. We also this morning have a limited supply coming from Jennings because we were eventually able to access Jennings.
Well, that's good news.
Yes. And we have 250,000 gallons to release along the windward coast this morning. So it's a question of us. We'll be meeting shortly to determine how to control that water because we have a gravity-fed system.
Yes.
So the control really is gravity, but we would have to implement valves, etc., to keep the water where we want it to go rather than have it go to waste.
Yes.
And we would like to have areas set up along the coast where persons can access water in the meantime. But as you mentioned, the critical thing for persons to understand is, and I heard some discussion on some radio stations this morning about CWSA being able to cover the supply. Well, as I mentioned, we cannot cover a river. We extract water from midway up a river. And what happens above that, you can't put tarpaulin over a river. That's miles long. So whatever washes off the slopes is what goes into the river. If you have ash on the slopes, ash washes into the river. And as I mentioned this morning on one program, it's like split peas soup for the average person. But the split peas is gray and not yellow. That's what we have coming into our river systems. And it's a suspension. So you can't even say, well, you're going to allow some detention time to allow settlement to happen. That is not possible. What we need is a deluge, a large downpour, and several of them. As Richie spoke earlier, Professor Robertson, what happens on the slopes ends up in the rivers. And we can see, persons can see the live example. When you wet the ash in your yard, what happens to it? It becomes like a slush, a slurry. So that's what happens in the rivers. So we are going to have to depend on, one, a cessation of the eruptions, a cessation of the ashfall, and a heavy downpour to wash the slopes and eventually have the river act in its self-cleansing way to clean up the supply.
In the aggregate of what you have from your springs, your wells, from Mamoon, from the limited work at Jennings, percentage-wise, how much of that of the national supply?
I think we from if you total that, you would probably get between 15 and 20%.
That's less than we were a couple of days ago.
Yes. But we as you mentioned earlier, we are hoping to augment that with supplies coming in from overseas because we hope to have bulk water being delivered and also bottled water that can be distributed.
Now, let me ask you. I know that at the central government level, we have been addressing water coming in. Has CWSA itself been seeking to get water, like, for instance, from the desal plants down in Canoan and Mustique?
Yes, we were supposed to, and I'm to check on this just after I leave the studio, receive a shipment from Mustique, and we've been promised some help from Canoan as well, desal water in bulk. So if those come in tanks, we can actually move the tanks off and hopefully set the tanks up at strategic locations throughout St. Vincent, where we can actually refill, so persons can go to those locations rather than,
No, let me ask you this: like persons who are in the orange zone, because most of the people who are in the red zone would have evacuated, and I will talk about that a little while from now. Do I think some sturdy folk are still in Georgetown, but north of Dry River, overwhelmingly, well, almost exclusively, people have gone. Same thing in the red zone down in the North Leeward area. But if you take places where you have rivers, the Mesopotamia Valley,
yes,
South Rivers, Byra,
yeah,
though persons have left Byra, the water which is coming in the river, you can collect that water to bathe and flush your toilet and so on.
Very guardedly, yes. Because I made the point on a program this morning as well. We are not assured of the quality of the water with ash in it, the chemical composition. And there's also the possibility of contamination, especially from dead animals, etc.
Okay.
Washing in. So we would, and I'm sure the Public Health Department would have a statement sometime later on, advise the public to boil all water that comes from these springs and rivers that they are extracting.
Even if you're going to bathe with it?
Even if you're going to bathe with it. I think that
what
should
about,
be,
okay.
Yeah. And
what about if you're using it, you take a bucket and you fill up your toilet tank?
Yes, but that's easy. That's
easy.
Yes,
that's no problem.
Yeah, that's no problem. Because we also received some message from, I spoke to Philip Jackson. His family has a spring in Mesopotamia, just on the other side of the river.
Yes.
Which we hope, we tested the water this morning. We're going to get the results, and hopefully we'll be able to use that spring. There's Sterling Spring in Mesopotamia and a couple other springs that we will be accessing, testing the water so that the communities can themselves access these areas.
It might be interesting if you test the one coming down at Gauss too.
Okay.
That may be, because that comes from a spring source about a mile and a half up from where I have my house.
Okay.
And that flows right down to the sea. And I don't know how much ash would have gone at the source itself by the spring, because all that has to be.
Yeah, because we need to ensure that the springs themselves are protected.
Yes, that's no. But what about inland areas where there are no rivers? Take, for instance, Chapman's in Saboto's constituency, Park Hill in mine. And there are several along the way where you may not have the rivers like in South Rivers or in Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
The Argyle and so on. Are we taking water into those communities because they don't have water?
Yes. Those are the high-stress areas that I mentioned yesterday on a program that we will be targeting today with the truck-borne water. So we're actually we're receiving the complaints, we are receiving the requests, and we are directing the truckers who lined up for water at Pembroke at our spring, and we are directing them where to go.
You'll be getting lots of complaints, but I got two, one after midnight last night from some nurses who are living at Mama's Casa in Brighton. They, because we have we have housed. There's some people who are housed.
Yes.
People have to be housed in guest houses. Some professionals, frontline workers, and the like.
Yeah.
They didn't have water.
Yeah. So
well, they made a complaint that the CWSA truck passed them and didn't leave any for them, but that may or may not be so.
But we wouldn't, if we know that they needed water and we know where they are, I don't think the truck would pass them.
Okay, but I'm just saying that's Mama's Casa in Brighton, and also Archbishop Jones, there are a number of persons who are at the center in the New Grongs Primary School. For instance, his family, there's about 15 of them. Of course, there are more people there.
Yeah.
And they have a problem there with water. I know a lot of people. I just mentioned those two.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are keeping in touch with me too.
Yeah. Well, what we want to do is, we can't be effective if there's not a system in place. And we have a system in place where we want to receive all the calls and the complaints.
Yes.
So that they can be logged and we can address them one by one.
Well, I think that's very important.
Yeah. And
you
the number,
want to repeat the number?
Yes. The number at CWS is 4571445, or alternately you can call 4562946. Those are the two numbers. We have persons there who are logging complaints and logging requests for water.
You have numbers, but how many lines you have?
2 lines, I said, but
okay.
But that should be be adequate. You
people
keep
make
calling.
they call short.
Yes, they call short. And we also have a WhatsApp number 4940933. 4940933. So even though you don't get through on a phone call, it's even better to log a WhatsApp complaint. So that and we have a Facebook page with our inbox. You can inbox complaints there as well.
There is a message that we've just received from the SSU that there is no water at where they're logged at 80 men at Montrose, just above you, Prime Minister.
Yes.
And they're asking for some assistance there.
Yes. And the of course, an area where we always have to keep in mind too is the prisons.
Yeah.
I know I spoke to the superintendent this morning and he has been in touch with CWSC. I don't want to add the individual things.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just to say that we have facilities. The medical facility at Murray's Road, they're doing dialysis as well for some patients. We are supposed to be organizing to take water there, bulk water to fill their storage tanks. We also have the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital on all the time.
Yes.
And obviously the prison in Kingston would be also
and Belle Isle.
serviced. And Belle Isle. Yeah.
Yes.
So those are the Belle Isle prison is near to our storage tank at Belle Isle as well. So
I want to say to persons who had by themselves gone into guest houses or hotels and they're having a problem, call CWSC. I'm talking about water. Mm-hmm. Call, if you wish, to NEMO, because there are some people who went in and who don't have the resources necessarily to keep their food going. And we have to get food packages to those persons too. But there is a system, and I just want you to know that you have to get into that system. Just call and give the information. Yesterday I was talking to the leadership of NEMO. It is important at NEMO that we do not just have persons who are doing the detailed work actually then there's some terrific volunteers. We need in all the various areas the leadership to be there, because leadership in this situation is critical, to be making decisions on the spot, moving things, because we can't, any delay could bring harm and pain and suffering to persons who are not in the shelters and very much so who are in the shelters. Yeah. I also want to take this opportunity to urge persons, because there's still some rooms at hotels and guest houses. Look, be sensible. The hotels and guest houses which are asking for you to come in, and if you take the vaccine, because they want to make sure that they themselves who operate in the hotels or guest houses and their staff are protected. Please give this thing serious consideration and help yourself accordingly. That's the way I will put that, urging very strongly.
Yeah. So
I don't know if there is What's the volume down? What's the volume down in South Leeward in this well?
Well, it's a well that replenishes itself, so it's constantly flowing.
Yeah, but
what's
the source?
We deliver just around. We can deliver up to a gallon a minute.
Okay.
Flow. So that's why we want the trucks to get into that area, line up, and we just deliver.
Okay.
Deliver water, and they can move and go. Because I had several calls this morning from persons who have trucks with storage tanks, because the trucks by themselves would not work.
Clearly.
We need the trucks fitted with storage tanks to come, and then you can assist us in going into communities that are stressed and assist.
Well, you have work to do, God.
Yes, so
thanks.
I heard on my way to the office,
Thanks.
I heard you,
I
so I just came in.
I appreciate.
Okay? So all the best.
Thank you very much.
And I also want to request patience and calm, as you said, and understanding from the community. This is an unprecedented event.
Yes.
And you don't plan for this. I remember when Richie came to the CWSA and he was giving us the rundown, the update. I heard him say, all of this could happen. And I smiled. I said to myself, well, Richie is just being the consummate professional and scientist. He's preparing us for the worst. Well, it's worse than the worst, than what I imagine. So we have, as a country, to buckle down and realize that this is not normal.
I want also to urge persons who are making reports, and several of them are coming to me. Take, for instance, there is someone who quite rightly raised with me the issue of some individuals, as she called them, street people. We have had a few of them around Kingstown, and the ash would be making life difficult for them. And it's an important category which is identified, and we have to take care of all human beings. Mm-hmm. But I will say to persons, if you know such individuals, take them to a shelter, please. Please take them to a shelter. Help in that way. Take them to a shelter. Be a good Samaritan. Because a lot of people are stretched doing a lot of things. So I want to urge initiative in that way also. Now, a few matters. We continue to do the work through the regional security system, SIDIMA, CAFA, CARICOM, OECS. I have an OECS meeting, heads of government meeting this morning, a brief meeting about 10:30. And we are working with Venezuela, Cuba. We're working with the Community of States of Latin America and the Caribbean. The agencies from Canada and the USA and the United Kingdom, they're coordinating with SIDIMA, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, and I speak to Liz Riley every day. The UN system is activated. The United Nations system is activated. A number of global NGOs, we're working with them. In New York, people, Cheryl Mason called me after she heard me last night on a program, a radio station in New York, which Caribbean people, Vincent Jones, listen to a lot, to update me as to all what they're doing. Because what I was asking persons is, look, do not send little individual packages and so on. It's create a lot of problems on the port at the moment. What you do, you overseas, you want to help people, send the money through Western Union. And I see a number of people at Western Union this morning, and we're going to urge Western Union to keep coming, to operating the services. Well, all the money services, because you'll have your ID card and so on in the shelter if you have somebody has to go and so on and so forth. it's evident. And to work in groups, and I know they're doing that in New York City, so that you do things collectively, that you can get the volume and the impact of that, and makes it easier for us to handle. As I say, a vessel, I believe it is in the harbor already from Grenada with water. The Venezuelan vessel is coming in this morning, maybe between 10 to 11 o'clock. It should have come earlier. But, these delays, the ash itself is creating difficulties. And when we're finished there with it, we're going to send it to St. Lucia, because I spoke to the Blue Waters person, Dominic Hadid, the Trinidad Blue Waters, but they have a plant in St. Lucia, and they would supply. I've been speaking to Prime Minister Rowley and Stuart Young, who is in the Minister of National Security in Trinidad and Tobago, and then Prime Minister Rowley of Trinidad and Tobago. They're sending up vessels tomorrow. They're sending security people tomorrow too, though we don't have as yet a security challenge, in the sense that we are overwhelmed. We have to plan just in case we don't know, and we need particular help. We have the recruits, the 70-odd recruits whom we started with last year. They have been inducted. They're on the road doing work. The RSS is activated. I'm in touch with the commissioner every single day, several times a day. All of these things, there are multiple parts, and I just want to give an indication as to how we are coordinating, while at the same time I'm addressing my mind and very much the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning doing this, to keep in touch with CDB, the World Bank, and I'm dealing with bilateral agencies and governments in a bilateral way for the reconstruction period after, because I can't wait. I have to be thinking about it. It's going to be you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, really. What you're going to need to rehabilitate, because agriculture. Gomery's on?
Yes, and
Well,
then I also have a message here from the director of Redo, Alan Alexander.
Okay.
That his colleague ambassador in TNT regarding a deployment to SVG from the TNT Defense Force, and they are trying to bring up supplies and officers.
Absolutely.
And so I would communicate that message to you just before you leave.
Yes.
But,
I think the officials are there communicating with one another, but the political directorate in Trinidad had already discussed it with me. 50 of them are supposed to be coming.
Okay, so we've got Minister Daniel on.
Okay,
the line.
let's hear the chief. Montgomery. Hey, Montgomery.
Okay, we'll try to get him back. Maybe he thought that we had gone because I had him for a
No.
while.
We want to hear him.
So we will make contact
Okay.
again, Prime Minister.
I should say this, that just by the way, so that people would be informed, organizationally, I have assigned certain particular roles of oversight here and there to particular ministers and to particular public servants to get this the kind of work done on in the best possible way and best possible manner. The president of Guyana, I've been in touch with him. A vessel is coming up tomorrow too. Montgomery is now on?
Yes, we're just getting him on.
Yes.
Which line is he on?
This is Deputy Prime Minister.
Deputy Prime Minister. No, it's not the Deputy Prime Minister.
Okay, go Prime Minister. Go ahead, Prime Minister.
Yes. I want to say something about the cruise ships. We have to, regrettably, either later today or tomorrow, we might have to tell the cruise ships that there's not a sufficient take-up of persons who wanted to leave St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I've been going around. There have been some persons who want to leave, but I don't think there is a large enough number of persons who want to leave St. Vincent and the Grenadines to go, at least at the moment, to go elsewhere.
Good
Yes,
morning, Prime
Montgomery.
Minister.
Morning. I know you went up. You were giving me the detailed report as to your trip yesterday up to Sandy Bay and what you saw at Raboka, and you went inland, looked at some of the farms and so on. Give us a report as to what you saw and about the ash and everything.
Well, Prime Minister, on my way up yesterday, when I got to Connery at around 10 o'clock, of course, there were a number of stones still falling down. So I had to stop at Connery and basically shelter that first part of it. While I was there, of course, 2 vehicles came down on their windscreens were already out. They were already smashed out by falling stones. So I waited until that part of it ceased, and then I went on to Georgetown, and then on to Raboka River. But when I got to Raboka River, of course, the river was just down and it was steaming. So I decided not to cross it since it was steaming because, of course, I didn't know the extent of the amount of heat.
Montgomery, let me just say this to persons who are watching us on UWI TV, is that the journey you're talking about is that in the northeast of the country.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Go ahead.
And therefore, of course, having seen what was happening at the river, I decided again to stay another hour and a half to let that subsided. And then when it subsided, I went across the river. I then went on to some of the farms there. And Prime Minister, what I saw, it was indeed terrible. Of course, it reminded me like times like in 2010 when Hurricane Thomas swept. What you would have seen is that the forest areas, both primary and secondary forests, all are gone. That is very close to the Soufriere volcano. You come down onto the farms, and the farms are basically gone. The tree crops, they are being denuded. There's only, in some cases, the stems that are standing.
That include coconut and breadfruit?
Breadfruit and coconut, of course. Mangoes, soursop. All of those tree crops, they are basically gone. Things like plantains and bananas, all those are gone.
What about the arrowroot? Because we should have been shortly digging arrowroot. What about the arrowroot?
Well, the thing is, with root crops, the ashfall in some areas would have been so deep that all of the vegetation would have been covered with these crops, whether it's arrowroot, yams, tanyas, dashin, ginger, you name it. There's not a single blade on the outside on some of these farms.
Go ahead.
So that it's an area that is basically leveled all across the farms. There is not going to be very much food in that area for quite some time.
Now let me ask you this: when you pass places like overland by the stream there, which sometimes is blocked up and so on with sand and so forth, and now with the rains, some rains have come. They usually you'll find an opening.
Fine.
What you could tell us about that? Did that happen? And what is your estimation of the ash which would be left in between? I mean, where the stream comes in between and parts the ash.
Okay, as I left the farms on Orange Hill and Son, heading northwards into Sandy Bay, when I got to overland, of course, the river was running, but observation was that on either side of the river bank, that there was a bank in itself, approximately 12, 14 inches. And that was so because of the ashfall that was in the riverbed itself.
Is,
Where
is,
the,
is
where
that
the water,
is that bank solely of ash?
solely of ash. That's the deposits from the asphalt itself. And so the water coming down would have eroded that material in its path. And so it left banks on either side. And of course, it is four-wheel drive vehicles that would have had to go across. Maybe I might have been one of the first persons to cross there. So that you had to take the four-wheel drive and cross those banks to get over. So you had both at Overland and at Noel, these embankments to cross from what is the asphalt that would have been deposited in those rivers.
What about the stream at London? Same thing?
No, well, the stream at London that has a bridge that you can cross over, but there was no deposit. Well,
You didn't
no
see that?
deposit to affect you.
Okay.
Areas like London playing field, all that, there was no greenery on London playing field. All that would have been covered in ash and sand.
Now, how Sandy Bay appeared to you?
Well, the thing is, all of the roofs, the houses that are still there are tremendous deposits on these houses. Those houses that were poorly constructed, of course, their roofs collapsed. And many of the sheds and so on along the way, all of those, the roofs are collapsed. And of course, we have work to do in terms of that kind of rebuilding.
What about windows and doors of even those where the roofs are okay?
Well, basically, where the roofs collapsed, then you may have some damage done by the roof coming down and damaging the doors and windows and things like
No,
that.
but even those where the roofs don't collapse, say better constructed house, the weight of the ash and the hit and destroy windows and doors?
Not that I would have seen.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Now, were there persons still in Sandy Bay?
There were persons still in Sandy Bay, Prime Minister.
How many persons in your estimate were still in Sandy Bay?
I would have passed, in the first instance, I would have passed around 6 or 7 persons on the road there. Then at another junction, I passed another about 10 or 11 persons. And at another junction, of course, I'm sure that I would have passed another half a dozen. So there may be another 2 dozen, maybe 3 dozen persons still remaining in Sandy Bay.
But we have to get them out. Yesterday, because of what, Shem Baptiste had said to me when I visited the Calicoa Primary School, and I was talking to him, and he told me that his estimate that in Sandy Bay had as many as 50 people. So I told him,
some actually came out, yeah?
Yes.
Well, actually came out.
Yes. Well,
but
yes.
There's still that hardcore that is still, they're resistant in coming out.
Well, we have to try and get them out because I hope they're listening, because it's going to get more and more dangerous as we go along. Yesterday we brought out 13 persons. I had asked the Coast Guard to go.
Yes.
People from Fancy, Owea Point, and a couple persons that walked over from Sandy Bay.
Yes.
The day before that, we took out 72 at the Owea jetty there. And the day before that, we took out 13.
Yes.
Sorry, 18. So in 3 days, we took out 103. The problem is this, by the Coast Guard. Yesterday when I went to Barley, Orlando Brewster, the Barley Secondary School, the Central Leeward, Orlando had come up and meet me there with Carlos James. Yeah. And Orlando Brewster had gone down to Chateaubelair, and he had overseen the bringing out of 13 persons.
Well,
the problem up in
Sandy Bay.
In Sandy Bay, there's no jetty to go in Sandy Bay, so you have to go up to Owea.
Yes.
But the problem at Owea, the sea is rough, and we are putting the lives of the Coast Guard officers at risk.
That's it.
And we are creating problems for the engines,
Very well.
for the boats, because of the ash. I've been speaking to Commander Kane about this. Of course, if persons are still there, I will give the instruction again to the Coast Guard to go and take persons. Today we'll give a particular hour. I am. So they have to indicate, call in the radio station, call in whoever they want to call, friend or family. It is over time for you to leave. It is highly dangerous to your health.
Very much so.
And your life. Of course, you know, we can't go and hold people and arrest them and bring them. It's the question of the individual freedom is important in that sense.
Yes.
But this is where they put in other persons at risk, sir.
Very much so, Prime Minister.
So it's a challenging thing.
I myself, I would try maybe at around 10 o'clock to leave here to go back up to see what is happening, and to still encourage others to try and come out as much as possible.
Well, Gomer, remember this though. I said to you this morning. Remember, I woke you and told you.
Well, I was already up. You know?
You were already up. All right.
Yes.
Well, I told you about. You have to look out
For the pyroclastic flows.
for the pyroclastic flows because that if any coming down and it catches you, your vehicle, everything gone.
Yes.
So you have to manage the risk carefully.
Yes. Of course, I'll get to the river and I'll stay there and see what is happening first.
Okay then.
Yes.
You get to Rabaka and watch it.
Yes. I'll make the observation.
All right then. But
Yes.
remember, on the side of caution.
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
All right, man. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister
Yes.
Daniel. Prime Minister, we've got a comment here from persons who grow like lettuce and cabbage and so forth. They're wondering if there's any advice in terms of the consumption because these were covered on their ash, and so persons want to know how to proceed.
Well, like anything else, you'll have to wash them. You'll have to wash them. You can't eat them with the ash. We are testing the ash, but we're not going to get the result. But common sense will say that you'll have to wash them. And the question is, where you're going to wash them, and then if you're going to use them, I suspect you'll have to steam them rather than eat them in their raw state. So there are challenges in that regard. But I can understand that problem. I forgot to ask Gomri about animals, but I guess sometimes he may tell us whether he saw carcasses and so on and so forth, or whether he saw the live ones still roaming about. We are in the time of COVID. And I have to talk about this every time. It's a problem in the shelters. Before the volcano blew explosively, we had this madness down in Beckway over Easter Sunday, and to some extent on Easter Monday. I was trying to get Simone yesterday evening to see whether we have seen any.
Would you like me to get?
Yes, if we could get Simone. If we could get to see whether the chief medical officer, whether we have any uptick as a consequence of that, and what is happening in the shelters in terms of the protocols and how we are controlling the COVID spread, and how we are going with the vaccination. It'd be important to get all of this. As you can see, there are multiple moving parts, and there's a heap of details. And everybody who has a challenge, a problem, believe me, that there are a multiple set of individual challenges here and there. But as God says, when you're dealing with any of them, we have to deal with them while recognizing them. We have to deal with them in a systemic manner and very systematically.
Okay.
We haven't been able to get her.
We'll try again, but in
Okay.
the meantime, we heard from the chief immigration officer that persons who are requesting travel documents, that the Immigration and Passports Office is open.
Okay, very good. I'm very happy to hear that. As I said, today we'll have to decide when we have the...
To get her.
Okay. Simone is coming on.
Yes, we're going to get her, Prime Minister.
Okay, I'm saying that we need to we have to take a decision sometime this afternoon, maybe early tomorrow, as to whether we just tell the cruise vessels, the cruise companies, thanks for their help, because people want to stay home. People seem to want to stay home, but they had that option. But if they don't want to take up that option, fine.
We've got Dr. Teaser online.
Simone.
Good morning, PM.
Now, naturally, I'm calling you on public health issues.
Yes, PM.
First of all, how we are coming with the COVID protocols in the shelters and so on. What reports are we getting? Have we have an uptick in the positivity rate?
Not in the shelters. We reported 14 new cases last night from the South Leeward district. We are pretty concerned because we have noticed over the last couple of weeks we've been getting more and more cases from the South Leeward, Barley, Pembroke area. So we reported 14 cases last night from that area. In the shelters, we've been doing rapid antigen testing, and as yet, we have not picked up any positive cases in the shelters. In terms of vaccinations in the shelters, we have administered a few, each shelter maybe between 6 to maximum 8 persons. But we continue to advocate for, try to encourage, especially what we are seeing in the community now, in places where persons have been evacuated to.
Let me ask this. Have we seen any uptick connected to persons who had gone down to Beckway over the Easter weekend?
Not yet. We anticipate, if anything, we might start seeing that this week.
Okay.
This week.
I want to ask this question. I know that hotels have been insisting that persons who want to come into their hotels or guest houses have to be vaccinated.
Yes.
I want to ask the question, can they be asked or persuaded to say, look, there are persons who are in dire situations in the emergency shelters who, for one reason or the other, don't want to take the vaccine, but whose condition may be such that it would necessitate them being in circumstances which are more hospitable. Old people, particularly very elderly people, some people with disabilities, pregnant women in their last stages, more or less, and their immediate families, some families with some children, and that if they don't want to be vaccinated, that we test them and ask the hoteliers whether that would satisfy their own requisites. Is there?
I would be very, I know what you. It would be very difficult for us because it would mean that we have to do the testing. As we know, you test today and you could be positive tomorrow.
Okay.
I would prefer that we maybe identify some other shelters or maybe where we could do some better accommodation of some of those persons, or even if it would be homes. But because of the,
Okay.
we have letting, so we have some persons who are pregnant, so we know that we would not vaccinate them. So they are on the. We have a group, a team, and we've been gathering names, and we've been going through that. I mean, some persons have been so adamant about the fact that they will not be vaccinated, and some of those persons are in the worst situation in terms of needing, you know.
But let me ask. But if you have a pregnant woman, like for instance, I went to Layu, and I saw a pregnant woman. She has a daughter, and there's her common law partner. We can't take the pregnant woman alone. You have to take the common law partner, and the common law partner says, "Listen, I'm not taking any vaccine." And she doesn't want to leave her common law partner, and obviously it would be good for the common law partner. Is there any way in which we can make that particular requirement more flexible?
Well, I guess that would have to be discussed with the hoteliers. As again, in a situation like that, I to look at the shelters where we might be able to better accommodate some of these persons.
Yeah,
because once we start to go down that pathway, we will try, PM. We will try. But
I have to. I'm
I understand, and we will.
I'm duty bound. I'm duty bound to interrogate you on it.
As always.
As always. No, because what happens is this with the ash. It doesn't matter what shelter you put the persons in. There's a problem with the ash. Of course, there would be a problem with the ash too in
the hotel,
in the hotels too, and so on.
Included water in all of the facilities.
Yes,
you know?
but I guess you'd have to make some broad judgments and then apply those broad judgments to individual cases.
That's exactly what we're doing on an individual basis, and how best we can accommodate persons, even as we understand the concerns of the.
Now, with the last uptick with 14 from the Pembroke district, the positivity rate for the last was what?
That was 42.6, I think, because there were only 41 samples.
Oh, the sample base was small.
So it was very small.
So that we can't take that as indicative as to what is happening.
Yeah.
That's in a sense almost like an abnormal cluster, but we don't know if that what is abnormal may become normal.
Because as I said, over the last 2 weeks or so, 2 to 3 weeks, we have been noticing. This is one of the communities we have been getting spikes from, you know. So
I'm deeply concerned about that possible spiral of COVID cases, and I want to urge persons again, please, take the vaccine. It's available, it's safe, and it will help us get over this problem during the volcano, the volcanic eruption. Easier, better, and we'll get back on a more normal road thereafter.
Definitely, because this would help to avert a disaster on a disaster. You know, a disaster is something that when something gets out of control, we have the opportunity now to prevent major outbreaks in facilities and communities, because persons in the shelters are going to go into communities and interact with persons. So even if for now we're not picking up any cases in the shelters, once it exists in the community and where you're coming from, there's a major risk for us to have big flares of COVID-19.
Okay, now what about the more broadly the public health system and primary health care? How are we going with matters, generally speaking, and the hospital services?
Hospital services, we've had some challenges with, MCMH is fine in terms of water, but some of our other facilities, for example, the Argyle Isolation Facility, Mental Health Center, we've been working through NEMO and the CWSA to get those tanks filled. So through the night we've been working on that. In terms of the primary health care system, staff members who came down who evacuated have been assigned to the different clinics, and we are pushing to ensure that every shelter has an investigation, has an assessment done by a public health team on a daily basis, reports to be submitted. That's what we are pushing to do, maintaining our other immunizations to make sure we have no other outbreaks. For now, we have not had reports on increased respiratory illnesses, but I'm pretty concerned about that and just urging persons who have asthma and are trying to treat it for themselves, either at home or in the shelters, to please indicate and please seek care, because you might be thinking that you're doing fine, but you can rapidly deteriorate. So
Okay.
There we are.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Joseph.
I don't know if we can take 2-3 questions, ask anybody, because I'd always like to get a feedback.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kiza. There's a comment, Prime Minister, and it's been actually sent by Minister Frederick Stevenson. There is much concern for persons who are setting up these GoFundMe campaigns and apparently using the resources for personal gains.
Well, I just want to advise persons, when you see these GoFund campaigns, just don't pay any attention to them unless the GoFund campaign has the sanction officially of NEMO or the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Simple, straightforward. That's the way to stop that. I mean, that level of rascality is unacceptable. You know, so we are. I'm very glad, Humble African, that you raised that to my attention. I just want to say again, and I'm sure we can have the persons in the Ministry of Information Technology to get in touch with the relevant platforms to say that there are persons who are using this reasonably suspected for their own private purposes, and that no such funding, GoFund, has been sanctioned by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines or NEMO. And until it is so funded, you are at your own risk when you send your money to these people. Simple, straightforward.
Okay, we tried to reach out to Dr. Robertson, Professor Robertson, to check on his progress, but he seems to have just gone out of telephone range, so we will try again. There's a question here, Prime Minister. I am a 62 diabetic on 3 medications. My house is full of ash. They have reported same to the Barley Secondary School, I am assuming. And the person is only asking for some assistance with food. They've been a diabetic for 35 years and is unable to get in.
Okay, well, I will just urge them to just, if they're in that area, get the shelter manager, because I know when I was there yesterday, they were making an arrangement to send some food to someone who is from the area, but who didn't want to come into the shelter. And please, I would want to ask them to do that. And also I raised the question about medication and the same thing. And if you're an 80-something-year-old person, get a younger person, a member of your family or something, to follow up on this with you, because there are hundreds of individual problems, and the shelter manager is not going to be able to deal with each of those individually. But if you have somebody doing the legwork from your family, they would be able to help.
Okay, we've got another comment here. Persons are asking if the airport will be open to receive aid.
The problem is not really the airport. The problem is the airspace. The airspace, not just for St. Vincent, but the Piaco Flight Information Region. That has it's put a block on flights coming in. Same thing in Barbados. There are the exception clearly is for emergency assistance and the like. But even if you were to give the okay for emergency assistance, the plane, the person who piloting that plane would want to know that the circumstances are not also very perilous for them and persons who are aboard. So those are the issues there. Hopefully we would sometime in not too far from now be able to deal with the airport. I just want to the airspace. Chris Ralph was overseas sent me this text message. He's from South Rivers. And I hope Gart is listening. There's an old water source that was a spring from a rock in South Rivers. This was abandoned by CWSA. Could this be reactivated? That's another possible source.
And we've had persons asking about the spa in Bel Air, if the water there is available.
Yes.
Could be used at this time.
Okay. Any other query? Because I myself have to go.
We're just trying to connect with his permission. He has given us permission to reach out to him, Professor Robertson. So we're just trying to connect to him before you go. And we're going to go right back to the lines once more. Professor Robertson, we're happy to have you with us again.
Welcome to the short term. Standing by.
Okay, copy that. Yes, sorry.
Yes,
I'm
Professor.
Here. Thank you.
Yes, Professor, we're just reaching out for any update. Prime Minister Gonsalves is still here with us in studio.
Well, I'm currently in Chateauville waiting on the wall for the Coast Guard boat. If they don't arrive in the next few minutes, we'll have to move because the summer activity is beginning to build up. It takes about 2 hours before the next one comes, so we don't want to be here.
Okay, well, I will... You were in touch with the Coast Guard, Richie?
Yeah, they were supposed to meet us at 9, but I think they're running a little bit late. The thing is, we have a short window to do this thing.
Okay, well, I will get on to Commander Kane or Officer Henry right away. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Right, thanks much.
God bless.
Thanks much. And
well, I have to go too. I have some work to go and do. Well, not work because I'm doing work here, additional work.
okay.
Some organizational work.
All right, Prime Minister, we know that you have to leave, but earlier on I had spoken with Mr. Tonley Myers about having an update, but they have now consented to do one. And I'm just receiving another message to ask if there would be concessions on barrels.
The concessions continue. That's not the. But I'm urging people, do this thing in a coordinated manner where you're coming from, in New York or Miami or wherever. You don't want at this time where we are having lots of vessels come in with lots of stuff to unload, to be dealing with a multiplicity of small quantities and other things. Dominica had that problem. That's why I say that. You remember a vessel from Trinidad had sent a lot of individual packages, enthusiastic Dominicans and so on, and other Trinidadians. And they were waiting for a week in the harbor in Roseau before they could actually be cleared. Some of this stuff even spoiled. Because you look, there are systems, and we have to work the systems. And your good intention is we appreciate. And your help. But from a management standpoint, disaster management, we have to make sure that we're efficient at the port. It's as simple as that in terms of what we're moving. Okay?
All right. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. We will organize and speak with Vinlic on our own because we are aware that you've got some other commitments. We're going to take Mr. Myers. Good morning, Mr. Myers. Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Yes, good morning. Yes, go right ahead, Mr. Myers. You've got an update for us?
Yes. Good morning, and good morning to listeners and customers of the electricity services. I'm just I want to give a quick update. Basically, we have, following the outages that we had on Saturday night leading into Sunday, we have addressed most of these outages. There are a few pockets of areas where a few customers here and there are out of electricity, and we want to show those customers that we are continuing to work on making sure that we establish electricity supply to these areas. There's also a substantial area that is out. Fortunately, it is in the red zone from Mount Young northward. There's no electricity in that area. There was a problem there last night, and we did inform our customers that we could not guarantee them that we will be able to reestablish or restore supply in the red zone. This is one such case. So all persons who are still in the red zone north of Mount Young are currently without electricity. I can't say exactly when we will be able to reestablish electricity supply in that area. It's in the red zone. We don't want to put our staff at under any undue risk situation. But outside of that, the pockets here and there in the country, we are in the process of addressing them. And our staff has worked all day yesterday, well into the evening, to do just that. And just thought that we should provide that update to customers who may be wondering what is happening in their area.
Well, thank you so much for that update, Mr. Myers, and congratulations to you and your team on your outstanding work.
Thank you.
This is NBC from studios at Richmond Hill in Kingstown. Johnny, we can do one of two things. You can take the chair and you can continue, because I've got to go and get a 5. Right, so that's what we're going to do. Johnny is going to spend some time with you. He's going to take your calls and hear your comments for just a bit longer as we continue to respond and to stand in solidarity with you as we go through this together. And I do believe that if we work together, all things will work well for us. And of course, we will continue the process of rebuilding.